She said, "I'm not coming to your dad's funeral. I already have plans with my friends." I responded, "I understand." Then I blocked her number and didn't speak to her for 3 weeks. When she showed up at my door crying about how I ghosted her during a hard time. My dad died 8 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. It's the quick and mean one that takes people before you've had time to process what's happening. 6 weeks from diagnosis to his final day. I'm still wrapping my head around it. This isn't a post about grief, though. This is about the moment I realized my girlfriend of 3 years was actually a supporting character in my life story, not a co-lead like I'd thought. And supporting characters sometimes need to be written out of the script. Some quick background. I'm 28, she's 27. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party where we bonded over being the only sober people there. Me because I was the designated driver, her because of medication. We'd been living together for about 1.5 years in a rental house in Minneapolis. No pets, no kids, no shared finances beyond splitting the rent and utilities. Both our names were on the lease, but we maintained separate bank accounts, separate car payments, separate cell phone plans, relevant for later. I work as a software developer for a healthcare company downtown. The job is fine, decent pay, good benefits, and I can usually work from home 1 or 2 days a week. Natalie, my now ex, works in marketing for a local brewery. My dad had been feeling off for a while before he finally went to the doctor. By then, the cancer had already spread. Terminal from the jump. When I got the call from my mom, I sat in my car in the Target parking lot for almost an hour, just staring at nothing. Natalie was sympathetic at first. She brought home my favorite takeout that night, listened while I talked about my dad, and held me when I needed to be held. Standard good partner stuff. But as the weeks went on and my dad got sicker, her patience began to visibly thin. "You're at the hospital again?" She'd text when I'd tell her I wouldn't be home for dinner. "Don't you think your mom can handle it for one night?" she'd ask when I'd get up early on a Saturday to drive to my parents' house in St. Paul, just a 20-minute drive away. "I miss fun, Mike," she said one night, about 3 weeks after the diagnosis. Cancer Mike is kind of a downer. I wish I'd ended things right then. But grief makes you foggy, and conflict feels impossible when you're already fighting a bigger battle. So I let it slide, and I started keeping my grief to myself around her. I'd cry in the shower or in my car, but put on a normal face at home. As the weeks passed, Natalie's supportive behavior steadily declined. She stopped asking how my dad was doing. She'd changed the subject when I mentioned hospital visits. She started making more plans with friends on evenings and weekends, precisely when I needed support most. When my dad died on a Tuesday night, it was both expected and shocking. I was with him and my mom when it happened, holding his hand. I called Natalie from the hospital parking lot at 3 a.m., and her first words were, "Did he finally pass?" Not, "I'm so sorry," or, "Are you okay?" But finally, like my dad's inconsiderate illness had been dragging on too long for her liking. Again, I was too numb to process what this said about her. I just told her I'd be staying at my mom's house for a couple days to help with arrangements, and she said that was probably for the best, because she had a lot going on at work and couldn't really deal with the funeral stuff too. The funeral was set for that Saturday, just 4 days after his death. Standard timing for my family's religious traditions. On Thursday morning, I was at my mom's kitchen table, helping her write the obituary, when Natalie called. "So, about Saturday," she started, with that tone people use when they're about to tell you something you won't like. "What about it?" I asked, already knowing where this was headed. "Well, Kayla's birthday thing is that day. We've had it planned for months, and I already put money down for the wine tour. I can't really bail." I was silent for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "You're telling me you're not coming to my dad's funeral because you have a wine tour?" "It's not just a wine tour," she said, defensive now. "It's a whole weekend thing with the girls. We've been planning it forever." "My dad died, Natalie. I know, and that sucks, but he was sick for a while, so it's not like this was a surprise. Kayla would be really hurt if I canceled last minute." I felt something inside me go very quiet and very cold. "Understood," I said. "Have fun on your tour." I hung up before she could respond, then turned off my phone completely. My mom was staring at me, having heard my half of the conversation. She's not coming, I told her. My mom, who had always been polite about Natalie, despite clearly having reservations, just nodded. Well, she said after a moment, that certainly clarifies things. Indeed it did. I turned my phone back on later that evening and saw several texts from Natalie, mostly variations of "you're overreacting" and "I can't believe you're trying to make me feel guilty." The final one read, "Fine, be like that. I'm still going with the girls. You could use the space anyway." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I opened my phone's settings, scrolled down to her name, and hit block contact. Then I did the same on all social media. I also turned off our shared location settings and changed the passwords to our streaming accounts. I wasn't being strategic or plotting revenge. I was just done. Empty. Too tired to argue or explain or do the emotional labor of helping her understand why I was hurt. The funeral came and went on Saturday. It was as lovely as a funeral can be. My dad was a high school music teacher, and the choir he directed for 23 years sang at the service. About 200 people showed up, some former students who had graduated decades ago. It was proof of a life well lived, of someone who touched others in meaningful ways. Natalie's absence was noted by some of my relatives who had met her at family gatherings, but I just shrugged and changed the subject. I stayed at my mom's house for a week after the funeral, helping her sort through Dad's things and manage the administrative hell that follows a death. During this time, I told my mom about my decision to end things with Natalie. She was supportive, offering her guest room for as long as I needed, but I knew I needed my own space to process everything. Natalie texted my mom once during that week, asking if I was okay since she couldn't reach me, and my mom replied simply, "He's managing. Taking some space." Natalie didn't follow up, which confirmed for both of us that her concern was superficial at best. When I finally went back to our house the following weekend, I half expected to find her there, ready for a confrontation. But the place was empty. According to a mutual friend who texted to check on me, Natalie was staying at Kayla's place for the weekend. Fine by me. I spent the next 2 days packing my essential belongings: clothes, personal items, electronics, and a few pieces of furniture that were mine before we moved in together. I left all the shared purchases and anything I couldn't be bothered to argue over. For larger items I couldn't immediately move but didn't want to lose, like my desk and bookshelf, I took photos and left a list of what I'd be coming back for later. Then I called my friend Derek, who had a spare bedroom in his 2-bedroom apartment about 10 minutes from my office. He'd been looking for someone to split rent with since his previous roommate moved out, so the timing worked for both of us. By Sunday night, I was settled into my new temporary home with my essentials, having arranged for a small storage unit nearby for the rest of my things. On Monday morning, I sent an email to our landlord explaining the situation, that Natalie and I had separated and I had moved out. I confirmed that I would continue to pay my portion of the rent until the lease ended in 4 months, but requested that my security deposit be applied to my final month rather than returned to me upon move-out. The landlord responded sympathetically, agreeing to my request and saying he'd discuss with Natalie her options for either finding a new roommate or potentially breaking the lease if she couldn't afford it alone. I specifically told him he could share that I had moved out, as I had nothing to hide. Then I waited, focusing on establishing a new routine. Work, gym, occasional dinners with Derek or other friends, regular calls with my mom. I processed my dual grief, for my dad and for the relationship I thought I had, as best I could. For exactly 18 days, there was nothing from Natalie. No calls to mutual friends asking about me, no attempts to reach out through family. Just silence. In retrospect, this absence of effort speaks volumes. She wasn't worried about my mental state after my father's death. She didn't wonder why I had suddenly vanished. She just assumed I was sulking somewhere and would eventually come crawling back. On the 19th day after I blocked her, there was a knock at Derek's door. When I opened it, there stood Natalie, eyes red and puffy, clutching her phone. "What the actual fuck, Mike?" she said before I could speak. "You moved out? You ghosted me? During the hardest time in your life when I was just trying to give you space?" I stared at her, genuinely confused for a moment. Then it clicked. In her mind, she was the victim here. How did you find me? I asked, not inviting her in. I had to call like 5 different people before Justin told me you were staying with Derek, she said, as if this was evidence of her dedication rather than proof that she'd waited nearly 3 weeks to even try looking for me. Justin was a coworker of mine who knew Derek from college. The connection wasn't hard to make if she'd actually tried. Why would you do this to me? Do what, exactly? Ghost me, block me, move out, without even talking to me first. I leaned against the doorframe. I didn't ghost you, Natalie. I broke up with you. I thought that was clear when you decided a wine tour was more important than supporting me at my father's funeral. Oh my God, are you still on that? It was Kayla's 30th birthday. A milestone. We'd been planning it for longer than my dad had been dying. Fascinating. Still not a good reason to skip your partner's father's funeral. She switched tactics, her voice softening into something pleading. Look, I know I messed up, but you just disappeared. Do you know how scary that was for me? I thought something might have happened to you. Clearly not, since it took you nearly 3 weeks to check. I was giving you space, she practically shouted, because you were being so weird and distant. My dad died, Natalie. I know that, she was crying now, but it felt performative. But life has to go on. What was I supposed to do, just sit around being sad with you forever? And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. She saw my grief as a choice I was making, an indulgence I could set aside if I really wanted to, not as the inescapable gravity it actually was. You were supposed to show up, I said quietly. That's all, just show up. I did show up. I brought you food. I listened to you talk about your dad. You didn't come to the funeral. One day. I missed one day. The most important one. She wiped angrily at her tears. So that's it? 3 years together, thrown away because I missed one event. I couldn't help but laugh, which only infuriated her more. It wasn't an event, Natalie. It wasn't a birthday party or a concert. It was me burying my father. It was the worst day of my life, and you chose not to be there because you'd rather drink wine with your friends. That is so unfair. No, what's unfair is that I spent 3 years with someone who sees my pain as an inconvenience. She tried to push past me into the apartment, but I blocked her way. We need to talk about this properly, she insisted. You can't just decide it's over without a conversation. I'm pretty sure I can. In fact, I already did. What about the lease? What about our stuff? What about... I've already spoken with the landlord. I'm paying my share of the rent until the lease ends. I've taken my personal belongings and left everything else. I'll be back next weekend to get the rest of my furniture. The landlord has the details. So that's it? You're just done? I nodded. I'm done. Because of one mistake? No, because of who you showed yourself to be when it actually mattered. Look, Natalie, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just clear. We're not right for each other. You showed me that, and I believe you. She stared at me for a long moment, then her expression hardened. Fine. You know what? You're right. We are done. But don't come crawling back when you realize what you threw away. With that parting shot, which I assume she thought was devastating, she turned and stormed off down the hallway. Derek, who had been tactfully hiding in his bedroom during this exchange, emerged after I closed the door. Damn, was all he said. Yeah? Want a beer? God, yes. We sat on his small balcony drinking in silence for a while before he finally asked, You okay? I thought about it, really thought about it. Not really, I admitted. My dad's dead, and the woman I thought I might marry turned out to be someone else entirely. But I will be okay, eventually. He clinked his bottle against mine. To eventually, he said. To eventually. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Natalie has cycled through various tactics, angry texts sent from friends' phones to get around the block, a tearful visit to my mom's house, which went poorly for her, as my mother has apparently been waiting 3 years to speak her mind, and finally, a handwritten letter explaining that she's forgiven me for overreacting and is ready to work through this difficult time together. I haven't responded to any of it. There's nothing left to say. My mom keeps telling me I dodged a bullet, which feels like an oversimplification. 3 years isn't a bullet. It's a chapter of my life. But it's a closed chapter now, and I'm okay with that. As for me, I'm taking it one day at a time. Grief comes in waves. Some days are easier than others. I've joined a rock climbing gym, started therapy, and am considering adopting a dog once I find a more permanent living situation. Small steps. I don't regret the relationship, and I don't hate Natalie. She's not a villain. She's just someone who showed me her priorities, and they didn't include being there for me when it mattered most. That's valuable information, and I'm grateful to have learned it now rather than later. Sometimes the trash takes itself out. All you have to do is notice the smell. Edit. Didn't expect this to blow up like it did. Thanks for all the comments and support. I'm trying to read everything, even if I can't respond to it all. Some things people keep asking. 1. No, I'm not considering getting back together with her. That door is closed, locked, and tossed into the Mississippi River. For non-Minnesotans, that's our local disposal method of choice. 2. Yes, my mom is awesome. She made me promise to tell you all that she appreciates the supportive comments about her. 3. The fun Mike, cancer Mike comment wasn't a one-off. It was part of a pattern of her minimizing what I was going through. She once suggested I take a weekend off from being sad so we could go to a concert. 4. To everyone saying I should have communicated better before blocking her, maybe you're right, but grief isn't rational. I didn't have the bandwidth to explain to a 27-year-old woman why skipping my dad's funeral was hurtful. Sometimes silence is a complete sentence. Or 5. For those asking if Natalie knew my dad well, yes. We'd been together 3 years. She spent holidays with my family. Dad taught her how to make his famous chili. He helped us move into our place. This wasn't a situation where they were strangers to each other. 6. And no, I don't think I was being cold or cruel by blocking her. I was protecting myself during an incredibly vulnerable time. If that's ghosting, then I guess I'm a ghost. Bill. Update. 3 months later, things have moved quickly since my original post. I found a small one-bedroom apartment closer to my office and moved in last month. The rent is higher than what I was paying at Derek's, but it's worth it to have my own space again. I got all my furniture out of storage and even splurged on some new pieces. I did end up adopting a dog, a 4-year-old pit mix named Buster, who had been at the shelter for over a year because he's missing a leg, and apparently that freaks people out. He's the chillest dog I've ever met. Perfectly happy to lounge around all day, but also down for whatever adventure I suggest. My apartment building is pet-friendly with a small dog park on site, which has been perfect for us. We're figuring out life together. Therapy has been helping. A lot. Turns out grief is complicated, and having a professional guide you through it is worth every penny. I've learned that it's possible to miss my dad desperately while also continuing to live and even find joy. He would have wanted that. As for Natalie, well, there's been some drama there. After my original post, she escalated her attempts to contact me, including showing up at my workplace, super inappropriate, and trying to organize an intervention with mutual friends, who mostly declined to participate, thankfully. The final straw came when she somehow got access to my Netflix account. I'd changed most passwords but completely forgot about this one, and changed my profile name to Asshole Who Ghosted Me. Petty, but it made me realize I needed to fully disentangle our digital lives. Changed all my remaining passwords, got a new email address, the works. Through mutual friends, I've heard she's dating someone new already, some guy she met at a bar who apparently really knows how to communicate his feelings, unlike me. Good for them. Genuinely. Mom is doing okay. We talk every day, and I go over for dinner at least once a week. The house feels emptier without Dad, but we're both adjusting. She's thinking about taking a watercolor class he always wanted to try but never got around to. Small ways of keeping him with us. I've started dating again, very casually. Nothing serious, just coffee or drinks here and there. I'm upfront about where I'm at emotionally, and most women have been understanding. No rush. If the right person comes along, great. If not, I'm good with Buster and my rock climbing gym and my gradually healing heart. Someone in the comments of my original post said that the best revenge is living well. I don't think of it as revenge anymore. Natalie is just a person who made a series of selfish choices, but I am trying to live well. Dad would have expected nothing less. That's it for updates. Thanks again for all the support. This internet stranger community helped more than you know. She said, my ex is coming to our wedding as my +1. You need to be mature about this. I replied, I completely understand. Then I called the venue, swapped my name on the contract for her ex's name, and sent them both the final bill. When I texted her a photo of my passport at the airport with the caption, "Have a great wedding, you two can pay for it." My fiancée Jade sat me down last week with the kind of serious look usually reserved for announcing a national emergency or that the last of the good coffee is gone. "My ex, Damien, is coming to our wedding as my plus one," she announced, her voice filled with a noble gravity, as if she were bestowing some great honor upon me. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine. "You need to be mature about this." I looked at her, then at the ridiculously expensive wedding binder on the coffee table, the one filled with fabric swatches and pictures of doves. A normal man might have argued. A lesser man might have pleaded. A more dramatic man might have flipped the table. I, however, had been expecting something like this for months. Her campaign to redefine our relationship into a bizarre, boundary-free commune of feelings had been escalating. So I just nodded, a thoughtful, supportive expression firmly in place. "I completely understand," I replied, my voice a perfect imitation of a man who is both mature and deeply enlightened. She practically glowed with pride. This, in her mind, was the final test. I had evolved. I was no longer one of those brutish, possessive men. I was ready for a modern partnership. What she didn't realize was that I did, in fact, completely understand. I understood that our engagement was over. And I understood that she and Damien were about to enter into a modern partnership of their own, one that was going to be very, very expensive. The plus one wasn't just a guest. He was about to be the guest of honor. You see, Jade operates on a different level of reality from most people. In her world, things like history and consequences are minor inconveniences. Her ex Damien wasn't just an ex. He was, in her words, a foundational part of her journey. Damien, from what I could gather, was a man whose primary occupation was having a journey. He was a freelance poet, a part-time yoga instructor, and a full-time financial burden on everyone he met. He and Jade had dated for 3 years before me, a dramatic on-again, off-again saga that apparently forged an unbreakable spiritual bond, a bond that conveniently re-emerged whenever he needed his rent paid. For the first year of our relationship, Jade was perfect. She was supportive, loving, and seemed to share my traditional values. Damien was a ghost, a funny story she told about her wilder days. She never asked for money, she praised my work ethic, and she seemed to genuinely appreciate the stable life I provided. I wasn't a simp paying for a freeloader. I was a man in what I believed to be a balanced, loving relationship. The red flags were not just absent, they were non-existent. Then, the ring went on her finger, and the deposits for the wedding started clearing. It was like a switch flipped. Suddenly, our relationship needed to evolve. Damien started reappearing, first in texts, then for innocent coffee dates. When I raised an eyebrow, I was accused of having toxic insecurities. She wasn't cheating, she explained. She was honoring her past while building our future. It was a bold strategy, you have to admit. About 2 months ago, we had the first major incident. I came home from work to find Damien in our living room, strumming a ukulele and apparently teaching Jade how to channel her inner truth through song. My inner truth was telling me to throw his ukulele out the window. He was sitting cross-legged on my couch, shoes off, with a serene look on his face that made me want to check my wallet. When I expressed my discomfort, Jade arranged a formal sit-down meeting where she and Damien explained to me, as if I were a child, that my possessive energy was stifling her creative spirit. Damien actually used the phrase, "Your paradigm of ownership is problematic." I almost laughed. Instead, I just nodded and said I would work on being more open-minded. My open-mindedness involved going online the next day and ordering a few discreet, high-definition security cameras for the common areas of my own apartment. A few weeks after the ukulele summit, I noticed a charge on our joint credit card, the one we used for shared household expenses, for $500 to an art supply store. I don't paint. Jade's artistic expression was limited to choosing Instagram filters. When I asked her about it, she waved her hand dismissively. Oh, that was for Damien. He's starting a new Canvas series on the transient nature of urban existence, but he was having a cash flow issue. So now my salary was funding transient urban existence. I didn't argue. I just took a screenshot of the charge, paid the bill, and quietly removed her as an authorized user on the account, telling her the bank must have sent her a new card that got lost in the mail. I told her I'd sort it out, which I did, by never sorting it out. This latest demand, that her ex be her personal guest at our wedding, was the grand finale of her campaign. It was so absurd, so breathtakingly arrogant, that it circled all the way back around to being a gift. She wasn't just giving me an excuse to end things. She was giving me a golden, engraved invitation to orchestrate the most satisfying exit imaginable. The camera footage I had collected was good, showing Damien was at our apartment far more often than I knew, but it was all circumstantial. Her demand was the opening I needed for something much more definitive. The next morning, after she left for a celebratory girls' day to tell everyone how wonderfully mature I was, I got to work. My first stop was not the venue, but my lawyer's office. I sat down with a man named Arthur, a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who looked like he'd seen it all. I laid out the situation. The wedding contracts were in my name, the apartment was mine, and I was about to be replaced by a ukulele-playing journey haver. Arthur listened patiently, a small smile playing on his lips. He reviewed the venue contract and confirmed my suspicions. The liability was ironclad. But he suggested a crucial addition to my plan. A simple letter won't be enough, he said. You need them to sign an official assumption of liability agreement. We'll draft one that transfers all financial responsibility, and we'll make it look like a standard, boring venue form, something they won't even bother to read. So that afternoon, I called Cynthia, the event coordinator at the winery. I gave her my grand speech about the selfless gift and the groom substitution. She was, as expected, baffled but intrigued. So you're paying for your fiancé to marry another man at the wedding you planned? She asked, her voice a perfect blend of professional courtesy and sheer disbelief. Cynthia, love is a river, not a reservoir, I said, improvising my own brand of nonsense. Sometimes you have to let it flow where it will. I'm just helping to clear the dam. I told her that, to make everything official and to protect the venue, I was having my lawyer send over a liability transfer form that the new couple would need to sign. I would, of course, include the $2,000 amendment fee upon receipt of the signed document. The promise of free money and zero liability was too good for her to pass up. She agreed to present the form to Jade and Damien as a standard procedural requirement. Next came the vendors, the caterer, the florist, the band, the photographer. I called each one, told them the same glorious story. I confirmed that all future communications and most importantly, all final invoices should be directed to the new primary contacts, Jade and Damien. One of them, the head of the string quartet, actually congratulated me on my profound emotional generosity. I almost felt bad, almost. Then came the guests. I spent an hour crafting a beautiful, heartfelt email. The subject line was, an exciting update regarding our wedding. I wrote about the beauty of modern love, about relationships that evolve in unexpected ways. I announced that, in the spirit of true maturity, I had decided to step aside, and that the wedding would now be a celebration of the union between Jade and her soulmate, Damien. I wished them a lifetime of happiness. I ended the email with a cheerful sign-off. I will be enjoying our previously scheduled honeymoon in Bali as a solo trip to celebrate my own journey of personal growth. I hope you all will join me in raising a glass to the happy couple. Best, my name. I sent it to every single person on the guest list. The final piece of the puzzle was our apartment. I packed a suitcase for Bali, went to the office and had all of Jade's mail forwarded to her parents' address, and then I called a locksmith. I also packed up every single one of Damien's possessions that had mysteriously migrated into my home. The ukulele, the yoga home, the ukulele, the yoga mat, the half-finished canvases depicting urban transients. I boxed them up neatly and left them outside the apartment door with a note, forgot these. It was time for my journey of personal growth to begin. I spent the next 2 days in a hotel, watching the chaos unfold from a safe distance. My phone started blowing up almost immediately. First, it was friends, confused by the email. "Is this a joke?" one asked. I replied with a simple, "Nope, just mature." Then came Jade's friends with more pointed questions. I ignored them. The main event, of course, was Jade herself. Her first text was just a string of question marks. Then came a, "Did you send that email?" I didn't reply. Then the phone calls started. I let them all go to voicemail. The real fun began on the day before the wedding. Cynthia from the venue called Jade and Damien in for a final logistics meeting. As they were leaving, she handed them the standard form. "We just need your signatures on this to finalize the change of groom on the event order," she said with a professional smile. In their arrogant, triumphant haze, they signed the legally binding assumption of liability without a second thought. They probably thought they were just signing a new seating chart. The moment Cynthia emailed me a copy of that signed document, the trap was sprung. The vendor calls started that afternoon. I can only imagine the conversation. "Hi Jade, this is Dave from Elegant Eats Catering. Just calling to confirm the final payment of $32,000 is on its way." I pictured her, sitting with Damien, the two of them looking at each other in sheer panic. Damien, a man who probably considered a successful month to be one where his debit card wasn't declined, was now legally on the hook for a six-figure wedding. That evening, I was sitting in the airport lounge, waiting for my flight to Bali, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, a sense of deep satisfaction washing over me. "Hello." A man's voice stammered. It was Damien. "What did you do?" He whispered, his voice cracking. "The venue just sent us a bill for everything. We signed some form. Cynthia said it was just for the event order." "Ah, the form," I said, taking a sip of my pre-flight cocktail. "You should always read the fine print, Damien. It's part of the journey. That form was a legally binding contract. You and Jade are now the proud owners of a very expensive party. Congratulations. But I don't have this kind of money." He squealed. "Jade said you were handling everything." "Well, I was," I said cheerfully. "But then I evolved. I became mature. This is my wedding gift to you both. Don't say I never gave you anything." I could hear Jade screaming in the background, a beautiful symphony of consequences. "Listen, I've got a plane to catch," I said. "You two have a wonderful wedding." I hung up. I took a picture of my passport and my boarding pass, artfully arranged next to my cocktail. I sent it to Jade with a simple caption: "Have a great wedding. You two can pay for it." Then I blocked her number, blocked Damien's number, and blocked her parents, who had just started calling. I turned my phone to airplane mode and settled in for the long flight. I heard about the wedding from my best man, Mark, who went to the venue out of a sense of morbid curiosity. He said it was a disaster of historic proportions. Jade and Damien had apparently tried to salvage it. They'd had a massive screaming fight with Cynthia in the lobby of the winery, waving the contract in her face. Cynthia, now legally protected, just calmly pointed to their signatures. Jade's parents had shown up, and her father had actually tried to write a check, but it was for a fraction of the amount owed. The vendors, having been alerted that the new clients were refusing to pay, all packed up and left. The band, the florist, the caterer, all gone. About 30 guests had shown up, confused by the conflicting emails. They were treated to the sight of Jade, in her wedding dress, sobbing in the parking lot while Damien argued with her father about money. Mark said Damien actually tried to get the guests to chip in. It did not go well. Most of the guests just turned around and left. A few stayed, presumably for the entertainment. There was no food, no music, no flowers. It was, by all accounts, the saddest and most pathetic wedding anyone had ever seen. Jade's modern partnership had devolved into a public financial dispute in under 24 hours. I spent 2 weeks in Bali. I went hiking, learned to surf, and drank a lot of excellent, inexpensive beer. I didn't think about Jade once. When I got back, my apartment was quiet and peaceful. There was a stack of angry letters from Jade's lawyer, which my own lawyer, Arthur, reviewed and then used as the basis for a very firm cease and desist letter. Her case, he informed me with a chuckle, was frivolous to the point of being comical. She had no claim to my property, and the wedding contracts, thanks to a notarized signature, were now her and Damien's problem. I heard through a friend that Jade and Damien had broken up, a predictable end to their epic romance. The venue and the vendors were, according to my source, pursuing them both legally for the outstanding balance. Her parents were apparently refusing to speak to her after she cost them a small fortune in non-refundable deposits and public humiliation. She had to move back home, a 30-something woman living in her childhood bedroom with a mountain of debt and a reputation as the runaway bride who got stuck with the bill. Damien, I heard, had left the state to embark on a new journey, one that presumably involved avoiding collection agencies. I poured myself a whiskey and enjoyed the silence.